Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Come on. Drop the hammer. Drop the hammer. And what an episode we have got for you today, ladies and gentlemen, because not only am I joined by capital J journalist Ava Santina. Ava, hello.
Hello. I whooped then. Did you hear it?
I know. And actually, people have been noticing that you started whooping.
I don't know if they like it, though.
Filling the void left by Ed and me being on a whooping ban by our prospective, girlfriend and wife. So
yeah. Well, my partner's too old to
watch the
watch online. Yeah,
so he doesn't know. He can't get the ick.
Yeah.
He can't get the ick. And as well as Ava, we're joined by Charlotte Nichols, the MP for Warrington North. Charlotte, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Very glad to have you here with us. We're going to be talking PMQs, Prime Minister's questions. Should we just go straight into it? Head first. Roll the clip.
Why is it John Prescott asked that in Tory Britain, tens of thousands of families are facing repossession, negative equity and homelessness? And can he tell us, 27 years later, why I'm having to ask the same question?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, clearly the Right Honourable Lady did not listen to my previous comments. The Prime Minister is at NATO. Of course, that wouldn't be a problem if she'd had her way. Her old boss wanted to abandon Ukraine, abolish the army and withdraw from NATO, and he certainly wouldn't be going to any summit, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to house building, I will take no lectures from the party opposite on home ownership. My parents would not have been able to buy their own home if it were not for Margaret Thatcher and the reforms introduced by her government, and this government is building on those with record house building.
Angela Rayner.
Mr. Speaker, I think he's taking lessons from the former Prime Minister on telling the facts. The last Labour government worked hard to dramatically reduce the number of children in temporary accommodation. Yeah. But under the Tories, the number of homeless children has risen by 75%. I'm proud of our record on tackling child poverty. Does the Right Honourable Gentleman feel ashamed of his?
Deputy Prime Minister.
I'll tell you what this government has done. We've lifted 400,000 children out of child poverty. We have introduced the national living wage, something the party opposite totally failed to do, and increased the national living wage by the largest amount ever, meaning £1,800 for working people, and cutting their taxes by doubling the personal allowance. That is the surest way to ensure we lift people out of poverty, and would never have happened with the party opposite.
Charlotte, you were in the chamber today. Just initial sort of thoughts, feels, vibes on this sessions of Prime Minister's questions?
I mean, I honestly think it might have been one of the worst ones I've ever been to.
Wow.
It had the kind of vibe of a supply teacher right at the end of the term, totally lost control of the class.
The TV's been wheeled in.
Yeah, no one's interested. Yeah, you're watching the first hour of Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. I must have watched that about 1,000 times at school, only after the first hour. Don't know what happens at the end.
Who's the supply teacher, Angela Rayner or Oliver Dowden?
No, Dowden's very much the supply teacher.
Yeah.
I think, it was one of those ones that at a certain point, I think, obviously Angela's done PMQs quite a few times now. And I think from her point of view, it must be boring coming up against someone like Dowden, because he just gives you nothing.
She had quite a good rapport, didn't she, with Rob when that was going on? Like, you could really tell, like, the vein would come out quite profusely, wouldn't it?
There was like a fizz and a crackle. Do you know what I mean? Like, there was like a bit of animosity. I felt that between them, whereas with Dowden, it's just kind of a bit flat.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. You kind of need that in the chamber. Sort of, there's that kind of tension that builds up around it. Everyone gets really into it with the kind of heckling and cheering and, all that sort of stuff. But with Dowden, it was just... And he, reading out all these kind of pre-prepared gags that he's not even delivering properly. Like at one point, he was literally there and he had this ring binder and he was like, well, I could just say to the deputy leader, and then flicks to this page and then sort of badly reads out this kind of zinger, and everyone's just there like, oh, mate, this is...
Should we just recap on what that zinger was?
Yeah,
I don't know if we've got it down here.
Shoot.
He basically said that Angela Rayner was auditioning to be John Prescott, which doesn't really make sense because she basically is John Prescott, just in a different shadow cabinet, right?
Yeah, I mean, she literally already has that job.
Yeah, and she also hasn't thrown a punch quite as well as John. And she wasn't in Gavin and Stacey, all right? So if anything, she's doing she's not quite there.
That clip from the archive where Prescott smacks that guy is one of my favourite. I think that's in like the all-time Hall of Fame, like British politics clips. And it's very close as well with the one of Ian Dale, like accosting that protester as well.
Yes.
It's like very much like, I enjoy watching like politicians or media people fighting because it's very clear that they do very little fighting.
Yep.
And then like, I don't know, it's kind of like handbaggy. It's kind of like people like pushing and like, there's no one really throws a punch apart from Prescott, which is why I like that one.
Prescott went in,
He literally just smacked him in the face.
Have you seen the Ian Dale video?
Well, I was going to say on the Prescott video, one of the really like underrated elements of it, if you watch it, just got Jess Morden walking behind him. This is like 30 years ago now, I think it was, something like that. She looks literally exactly the same.
Really?
Like, drop your skincare routine, hun.
Really?
It's incredible.
Drop the link.
Honestly, it's like every time I watch it, I know that like, you know, the kind of key moment and the punch is the bit that I should be focused on. But every time I watch it, I'm like, Jess Morden, what moisturiser do you use? I must know.
It's got to be retinol.
Pardon?
It's got to be retinol.
I mean, it's got to be something. She's just, as I said, has not aged since that video was taken.
How far into skincare were we 30 years ago? Did we have sort of our hyaluronic acids and all that sort of stuff? Was that going on?
No, but you know, if you were a strict user of Olay's cold cream, I think you carried through because my dad's mum used that and she looks fantastic. And the Italian on the other side looks like a cigarette.
A smoked one.
Yeah.
Very good. Should we talk a little bit about the substance of what was said at Prime Minister's Questions?
Yeah.
Should we talk? So Rayner's going on about, well, she went on child poverty, didn't she, as well as sort of increasing temporary accommodation, homelessness. I quite liked the whole, you know, Prescott said this 27 years ago. I thought that was a good bit.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that. But it's a pertinent issue. And I think, Charlotte, maybe you could talk about this because listeners, regular watchers of Prime Minister's Questions will probably be a little bit perplexed that when Angela Rayner stands up and says, you know, what's the situation like now since Labour came out of government in 2010? The situation's got worse. And then Dowden will stand up and be like, well, no, actually, since 2010, you know, we've reduced by half. And you're sort of getting two statistics on the face of it, but, you know, both could be true, but they say completely the opposite thing. And you're kind of sat there looking at the two of them and being like, I don't know who to believe here. Like, what's going on? Could you talk us through sort of that exchange and are both of them right? Is one of them right? Like, what's happening there when that's going on?
I mean, we've moved into this sort of bizarre post-truth politics, essentially, where after Boris Johnson, any minister can get up and say something that is just factually not true. And that just seems to be okay. And I mean, Dowden today at PMQs was a classic example of it because he kept banging away about, you know, this Conservative government has lifted 400,000 children out of poverty. And it's like, no, you literally just changed the definition of what poverty is. They changed the legal definition of what poverty is in order to be able to say that they had taken children out of it. So, you know, he's saying, oh yeah, you know, we've done this great thing, but like, we've all got eyes. Do you know what I mean? We all look around our friendship groups, we look around our communities, we look at, you know, food banks, fundraising on social media and all of this sort of stuff. And we know that that just isn't true. So you can use whatever sophistry you like with statistics, but I think people know when they're watching that who is telling the truth and who isn't. And clearly it's Labour and Angela Rayner that were on the side of not only the facts of what's going on at the moment, but trying to really bring it back down to that human level of what it means that the cost of living crisis has got just so out of control in this country, and the government doesn't seem to have any grasp whatsoever of the urgency of resolving this. And they're quite happy to just continue to say, no, everything's fine. And I'm sure it is fine if you're Oliver Dowden. Do you know what I mean? It's, but it's just not a normal people's experience of this issue.
On that point, does it sort of thinking forward, thinking to the future and about, an incoming general election, you must kind of be wringing your hands at Southside and, your other Labour MPs thinking, all we've got to do is say to these people, say to the electorate, are you in a better position than you were 13 years ago?
And I think this is something that has been a real feature of a lot of our comms recently. In fact, I think our most recent party political broadcast was asking people exactly that question, because people that I speak to, I'm out door knocking every week in Warrington, have my surgeries every week, I'm speaking to people even on the days I'm down here by Zoom and email and everything else. And you say to them, what is working better? And whether it's, we've got to a point now, there's all this talk about sort of, between heating and eating that's gone on for a few years now. I'm now having pensioners tell me that they're rationing their lighting at home because of how difficult they're finding things. They've only got one light bulb in the house that's plugged in because their electricity bills have got so out of control. They've not had their heating on sometimes for years now, but they're now getting to the point that they're essentially living in the dark in winter. It's these sorts of things that I just don't think that they get and understand and actually care about, because all of us will have noticed, whether it's even on silly things like the sort of price of Lurpak or what have you, everything is just more expensive at the moment. Like, you can't cough in the general direction of a Tesco's without it costing you about 35 quid. Whether it's bus fares, whether it's, at the fuel pump, whether it's train fares, whether it's, mortgages, rent. I mean, the amount of people that I know that are having to either move back in with their parents at the moment, or actually parents having to move in with their adult children, which is something that I'm seeing more and more of at the moment. The children have moved out, they've got their own place, and it's the parents that are struggling and saying, actually, can I come and live with you? Like, this is not normal. And I'm sick of the kind of top end of the political class within the Conservative Party acting as though it is, and we can just, ride it out and it'll all be fine without them needing to do anything.
I think a lot of the country is minded to agree with you, but my question, the criticism that I would level at the Labour Party, and I'm not the only one that would do this, is say, yeah, okay, the Tories are failing, the country is in a dire state, but it's not good enough to just say, well, they're doing a bad job, we'll do a better one. Where is the compelling vision, the sort of programme for government, the broader picture about what Labour would do and how it would radically improve the country?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm very clear that it's not enough to want to vote against the government. Yeah, I want people to actively want to vote for us. We're not just the least worst option. I want us to be the best option for people to go out and want to actively vote Labour. And I do think that we have got a job of work to do. I mean, we're in a very comfortable place in the polls at the moment. That's a great thing to see given, the last few years and how bad things got on that front. But that's not something that we can take for granted without offering people that sense of something hopeful. You can't just be, we'll make cuts and stuff, but, nicely and better and stuff. That's not, no one's going to go out to vote for that. You might find that a lot of people stay at home, but that's not going to be enough. And I think, through the work that they've been doing at the moment around kind of outlining the missions for the kind of broad brushstroke stuff, but now us getting into that National Policy Forum process, sitting down with all of our different trade unions, CLPs, other affiliated organisations, campaigning bodies, to try to get something that, within the context of a very, very difficult balance sheet that we'll essentially be inheriting, how we can make the best out of that. And I think there's lots of things we can do that aren't necessarily going to be, costing huge amounts of money, but will materially be making people's lives better. And I wouldn't be in the Labour Party if I didn't believe that was the case.
It's a tricky line or tightrope to kind of walk on, because I think half the country think that Labour are going to spend too much money if they get into power. And then the other half of the country is listening to Keir Starmer when he's talking about difficult choices. I mean, what comes up on the doorstep? Which school of thought is cutting through?
I think it's a real mix, to be honest. And, given that we're still maybe 18 months away from a general election, a lot of the talk is less about, what's going to be happening in the medium term and with a sort of change of government, God willing, but more about how am I going to get to the end of this month? And for businesses in particular, the end of the financial year and all these sorts of, for some of our small business owners, I think what people are bringing up is much more immediate concerns, but it's making sure that we're pushing for those things, that we're, reflecting the difficulties that people are having right across the economy in every sector, in every part of the country. That's something that we've got to be reflecting back at the moment. But when it comes to that longer term stuff, it is that mix of people wanting reassurance that, this magic money tree isn't something that we're basing our economic policy on, and it isn't, but also, wanting us to do something because, we don't just want to be managing a country that's in decline.
He said that today, didn't he? Oliver Dowden.
Just about
Sorry,
to say
yeah.
it. No, you go. He said, what is it? Tree hug?
Yeah, you're hugging the magic money tree, that party. That's what he said.
Boom, boom.
Yeah.
Fuck me.
Yeah, and you could tell from everyone around him just being like, that real zinger really landed that one. Really cut us all to the
Who
bone.
do you reckon around that cabinet table? Who do you reckon's got the most crack? Like when they all go for I don't know, summer recess drinks, who's making them laugh? Who's got a bit of a sense of humour to them?
I reckon James Cleverly's got quite good banter.
That's a good shout. That I agree.
Back in 2019 during election, we went to his constituency and walked his dogs with him and interviewed him. Honestly, he does have a bit of crack. He's got a bit of chat, and he also said we went to the pub afterwards, sat down like a couple of pints, a packet of crisps. He went, PoliticsJOE, you guys are more Tory than you realise. And I said, James, do tell me. He was like, you're Conservative. I said, all right, sure. He said, you've got all these other media organisations around you. They're very expensive. They're bloated. They're big beast legacy. Very expensive. Fancy cameras. You two have come here. Small kit. Creating content. And you're disrupting the market. And you're doing it cheaper, better, and in a more engaging way. You are a Conservative. That's
interesting, isn't it? How did you feel about that? Is that when you kissed him?
Yeah, and then we fucked. No, I'd never thought about it like that. I mean, look, yeah, I do. Does like being by being a disruptor? Are you a Tory? I don't think so.
Well, you're not a Lib Dem.
Definitely not. Definitely not a Lib Dem over my dead body. No, he was. I think Conservatives like to conceive of themselves as like the entrepreneur, the small business, the person that's going out and doing something different and therefore is finding success in that. I don't think that's like a necessarily Conservative thing. No. To be quite honest with you, if anything, I would in the sense of small c Conservative, actually you're probably more on the side of like legacy and traditional media. The newspaper of record is probably more Tory.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know.
That was a long-winded way to say you agree with him.
Certainly was. Should we do another clip, Mhairi Black? Roll the clip.
Last month, the Deputy Prime Minister dismissed warnings from these benches that mortgage rates were nearly back to where they were after the disastrous mini-budget. This week, mortgage rates have surpassed those levels. How high do they need to go until he and his government takes it seriously?
Yeah. Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady knows, people around the world know, that the driver of higher mortgage rates is higher inflation. And higher inflation is caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the post-COVID supply chains. But what we have to do is make sure we halve inflation. It's only by getting inflation under control that we will be able to get mortgage rates down, and that requires discipline. Discipline on spending, discipline on public sector pay, and discipline on energy supply, all of which is lacking from that party.
Mhairi Black.
Bank of England predict that mortgage payments will rise by at least £500 for 1 million households. The Prime Minister says that people need to hold their nerve. The Chancellor said just last night that mortgage holders should just shop around. Speaking of his own party, the member for South West Devon said, if the circus doesn't stop by Christmas, it's over. Does the Deputy Prime Minister understand that people can't afford to wait until Christmas and that they need help right now?
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the fundamental thing we have to do is to halve inflation. That is an approach that the IMF, quote, strongly endorses because higher inflation drives higher mortgage rates. But that's not all we are doing. With the mortgage charter signed up by 90% of mortgage providers, we are giving people help to extend their terms, to go interest only, and to reduce their monthly payments. Now, that action is supported by Martin Lewis, a real money-saving expert, unlike the big spenders on those benches.
So that was Mhairi Black, who is standing in for Stephen Flynn this week.
Flinner.
How did I nearly forget that?
I know. The Flynn.
Have I told the story on here yet? It's not a really short one. About how this presenter texted me the other day and asked me if I thought Stephen Flynn was funnier now that he was bald. And it came out of absolutely nowhere. I just sort of looked at my phone like, where has that come from?
I think there is something about like comedians, like if they're ugly, they're funnier.
I don't think Stephen Flynn's ugly.
No, but that's not what I'm saying. But I'm just like, because if it was written down on paper, you'd say, well, obviously, like someone's physical appearance has absolutely nothing to do with their sense of humour or whether they're funny or not. But I do enjoy watching like an ugly man just like berate himself on stage.
Yeah, my first crush was Frankie Boyle.
Cool.
I definitely feel like if you're ugly, you've got to like work harder at being funny.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it, isn't it? I know someone who I won't name for obvious reasons.
Why? Out them. Say you fancy them.
Ugly old man, very funny, and it's in lieu of. I think people who are good looking, they get it a bit easy, don't they?
Yeah.
They get it a bit easy, and they don't really have to develop a personality. Whereas you can tell when someone you had a bit of a rough time when you were younger, you're fucking funny, you know.
And that's why we're really boring.
Oh, yeah. 100%. I mean, I feel like that's erasing my experience of, NHS glasses, braces, dranky bob that my mum cut. And
Really?
Sort of, I've been this tall since I was 10. But also, like, was sort of rail thin, so sort of used to walk around like Bambi at the beginning of the film all a bit,
I
Honestly,
always say
I'm
walk
such
around
a
like
dweeb,
Bambi.
man.
Did your mum cut your hair for long?
Thankfully not, but I do enjoy showing people this picture. I think it was like in year 4, my class photo, and my fringe is on 3 different levels, and I'm just there like
Still serving looks.
Yeah, I mean, it was just awful.
Would you share the photo with us so that we could put it
yeah.
in the episode at this point? Would you do that?
Happy to.
Yeah, amazing.
It's just stunning.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, between being the sort of ginger middle child and my mum making it even worse for me with her haircuts and stuff. I like to think that I've got maybe more of a personality than I might otherwise have if
You've got to sort your mum out. You've got to have a word. You're not doing me any favours here, Mar. You're not doing me any favours here with this fringe.
I think it's sabotage, isn't it? Anyway, Mhairi Black.
Yeah, Stephen Flynn wasn't actually in PMQs.
Yeah, no. So anyway, back to Mhairi Black.
Yeah.
Who is standing down, we now know, at the next election. Are you standing at the next election?
I am indeed. I was
Very good.
re-selected last January, I believe, unanimously by the good people of Warrington North Constituency Labour Party.
Very good. A little bit gutted to hear about Mhairi leaving.
Yeah, I mean, I think listening to that interview, there wasn't really anything she said that I could disagree with. I mean, obviously politically we're not in the same space on the kind of big constitutional questions and things like that, obviously. But, I think her assessment of the way Westminster works, the culture there and this sort of stuff, I mean, there was literally nothing she said that I was like, well, that's wrong. And having been here, sort of 3 or 4 years now, I can totally understand being just done after 10.
It's crazy she's been there for 10, isn't it? I still think of her
20,
as...
wasn't she?
Yeah, she's still younger than me and she's been in MP for 10 years. So I'm like, it's upsetting.
Yeah, that's rough.
All right, anyway, so what she was talking about today...
Yeah, go on.
So she was asking the Deputy Prime Minister about mortgage payments and how they're about to spike for 1 million households. And for some bizarre reason, Oliver Dowden came back and explained to her that she didn't understand economics and actually he should look to their good friend, Martin Lewis, who I don't imagine believes himself to be a good friend of the Deputy Prime Minister of this country. But anyway, apparently he's the only one who knows what's going on and it's all fine.
The brass neck to be like, no, silly woman, I know about the economy. Look at what's happening in the economy right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a lesson about interest rates and mortgages and inflation because, my God, is the mortgage market in a healthy place right now.
Angela Rayner had a little jibe. She had a good slam dunk.
Oh,
God,
really?
Take that out. Don't put that in. That's so embarrassing. Oh, God.
What did she say?
She said, you're the ones who crashed the economy, which was quite good. And that's probably going to be the line now for the next 20, 30 years. That's going to be like the
note.
The note. It's going to be like the Greg Hands note, isn't it? There's no money left. So will you crash the economy?
But, I mean, this is the thing about, bringing up Martin Lewis. Like, there is a reason why he has become a household name in the way that he has, particularly in the last sort of year or two. And it's that literally everyone is finding it difficult to manage at the moment. So the fact that he's having to, give people on a really kind of mass scale some of the advice that he's been giving that previously, had been about if you were in a bit of debt and you needed a bit of help, sort of moving things around, or you wanted to make, some savings and slightly smarter choices. Even Martin Lewis, when he has come in front of various select committees, including the Bays committee that I'm on, over the last year, has said, there's no advice that I can give people that will actually be that helpful at the moment, because this isn't about people not being able to budget properly. This isn't about people making bad decisions. This is about the government just tanking everything.
There's a parallel as well, isn't there? I mean, looking at mortgage rates at the moment, and you could look at the bond market as well, or gilt yields. The economic indicators, they're in a very similar place to where they were when Liz Truss was in power. Very, very similar place. And it's interesting to me. I know you've spoken about this before on the podcast about the sort of the Tory party deciding that it was an opportunity to get rid of Liz Truss, and it's catch-22 now. They can't do it again, can they? With Rishi Sunak, they're sort of stuck with him until the next election. They couldn't change leader again.
Oh, I think they could.
You think?
Who would you put in?
Well,
there's no one left.
No, I mean,
cleverly
on some, yeah. I mean, at least it would spice up PMQs a bit for the last bit of Parliament.
Yeah.
What was he wearing in what country was he in the other week when he was wearing a full fur? What was that?
He was in Central Asia, wasn't he? He was on the steppe somewhere. I think I want to say
Mongolia. I thought he was in.
Could be something.
I remember the picture because I have to say I've been enjoying his sort of social media game recently. I've got the worst photo of me and him from some Board of Deputies Hanukkah thing last year, where I decided to wear a kind of menorah felt hat thing, just nice. For a laugh.
Yeah, nice.
And How was your fringe?
Pardon? Oh, this was pre-fringe. So, it was just my big forehead with the menorah on top instead. But yeah, there's this picture of me and James Cleverly where we look like your sort of disappointed Jewish parents after you did a bad bar mitzvah reading. And I've literally got it printed in the office because every time I look at it, it makes me laugh because I'm just like, what was going on in this photo? Yeah. And he carries that energy into, some of the photos and things that he's taken now that he's Foreign Secretary. And I rate it, the banter of it, just leaning into the costume and being like, do you know what? Cool. This is what I'm wearing.
It's also probably like a thinly veiled, maybe, I don't know. Is it a dig at Liz Truss and her Instagram game? When she was going full send on the Thatcher impersonation, and
what a time that was.
I know. Halcyon days.
Time. She was getting her hair done every single day, and that just blows my mind. How do you have time for a wash and blow dry every day? All right? Well, I'm not even the Prime Minister. I couldn't do it.
It's also that mad picture that she had it was in Tokyo on the Shibuya crossing, and it's the busiest crossing in the world. And apparently she was late for all these meetings because she was trying to nail the shot on the crossing and trying to make, so she's sort of striding across purposefully and all this sort of thing. And you just think, you're literally the Foreign Secretary. That is the most cringe thing I've ever heard. Yeah. Just go to the meeting. Do you know what I mean? Do your job.
It's quite a nice...
Can any of us honestly say?
Well, yeah. That's what I was about to say. It's a very neat microcosm for society, because I'm sure there's plenty of people listening who can identify with, spending too much time trying to take a photo. They just, maybe been a bit late to the pub.
Yeah.
Rather than
I'm a one take.
late for a bilat with Japan.
I'm a one take. Let me put that out there right now. Every photo you've seen of me has been on the first take.
Really?
No.
One and done. One and done. No, I'm very firmly, it's not going to surprise you to hear that I'm like very much in sort of like the Instagram boyfriend category, you know.
Yeah?
Like, take the pics.
Right. I completely misunderstood that, and I thought you meant your wife was taking photos of you.
No,
a lot, other way around.
I prefer this mental image of her just like sadly following him around on holiday where he's like, no, like, you know, bit more.
Get the ass in.
One of those plastic palm trees. He's like, get this in.
Yeah.
I think the number one rule is like take at least 50 photos. You know? Yeah. Like slight change in angle, move it around, but you're just hammering that shutter button. Because I've made the mistake in the past of taking one. No.
Not one.
No.
Never
See,
one.
I mean, it is one of the things that like in a job like mine where you become sort of used to having photos of yourself taken with some regularity, like, you
and
know,
not having control of them as well.
Yeah, like if you go back through like my Instagram before I got elected, there's barely any pictures of me on there because it's just like, here is a nice pint I had. Here are my friends.
Right.
Like this sort of, but then suddenly it's, you know, here I am standing in front of something.
Wearing
and whatever. Yeah, exactly. Wearing a felt menorah. Oh, mate, like, I have to say, my fancy dress game is pretty strong.
Is it?
Like, we had a fundraising event in Warrington recently for the Mayor's charity, and I went dressed as Old Billy the horse.
Who's that?
Who's Old Billy? Old Billy is the oldest horse that ever lived.
What do you
He's from
mean?
Warrington, lived to 62 years old.
Wow, that's a good knock.
A legend, a king. Like, there's murals of him around Warrington. We've commissioned a statue of him.
Were you the full
the new
horse,
cat.
or were you part of it too?
No, so I had like this big sort of horse head on, and then like a sort of horse onesie. But you know, as I said, just
Do people get it?
as
I
I said,
imagine in Warrington,
literally, I was walking home from the town hall because I sort of lived. Yeah, well, essentially, the bit of Warrington that I live in is like too close to the town centre for any self-respecting taxi driver to take you there because they're like, why would I bother? Like, that's not a worthwhile fare. So I was walking back on, you know, late at night in my full horse costume, and everyone's like, "Oh, Billy!" And it's like, "Yes, thank you."
You get it.
You get it.
I've had some good fancy dress. I did Smurfette once. I painted my entire body blue, bought a white nightie and a blonde wig, stuck that on, Smurfette.
That's good.
Was that a good look for you?
I'll show you a photo after this of me with like a kebab in one hand. Yeah, it's not necessarily a good look. I've done, we were talking about gaming, maybe we'll talk about gaming in a second. I've done Master Chief as well.
Yeah.
My friend we had leftover blue paint from the Smurfs night, so he went as a grunt, blued up, built himself like a cardboard carapace at the back, and then I turned a helmet into like a Master Chief helmet. Yeah.
I've never gone that big on the like video games costumes, but I've got an excellent picture of me dressed as Misty from Pokemon for, I think it was Purim one year.
Is that a normal day for?
Sorry, Purim is one of the greatest festivals in the Jewish calendar. So there are 4 things that you have to do.
Everyone dresses up as Misty
Pardon?
from Pokemon. That's the first thing.
Well, no, literally, fancy dress is one of the things that you are like commanded to do on
Really?
this festival. Yeah, so it's usually sort of February, March kind of time. Honestly, go to Stamford Hill or Prestwich or somewhere for Purim. It is incredible.
Is the fancy dress in the Torah? Is that?
Pardon? Yeah, so it's basically because it's disguise essentially.
Right.
So you wear
Like what you've done there. No.
yeah. Well, it's part of the story. So
Okay, go on, tell it.
So the four things you have to do. You have to go to synagogue to hear the reading of this thing called Megillah Esther, so the story of Esther, and you know it involves her sort of, you know, defeating the king and whatever through the medium of fancy dress and disguise and things. So that's kind of, you know, it all goes back to this. You have to eat these little sort of cookies called Hamantaschen. They're delicious. Then the other 2 things you have to do are you are required to get drunk on this festival. And honestly, the sages have specified the level of inebriated that you're meant to get. And you have to get so drunk that you can't tell the difference between Baruch Mordechai Aruch Haman. So blessed is Mordechai, cursed is Haman, which is the goodie and the baddie. In this story that you hear, you have to get drunk enough to not be able to distinguish which one's the good character and which one's the bad character.
Because was he drunk? Is that why?
So, but the more religious you are, the harder it's going to be to get that mixed up. So, as I said,
The rabbis are battered.
Yeah, honestly, like I've had times where my rabbi's there dressed as Father Christmas, absolutely steaming. Free bar at my synagogue on Purim. It's honestly, I'm telling you, it is one of the best festivals.
Can we come? Can you bring like a?
Yeah, I bought Nadine Batchelor-Hunt to Westminster Synagogue
But
for
she
Purim
is Jewish.
this year.
Can you bring a Catholic?
Well, yeah, why not?
Anglicanism fucking sucks, man. I mean, I'm just sat here listening to this being like...
I know.
Well-
We don't even get to do Halloween.
Honestly, like, I used to live with my sort of former housemate before now, was a guy called Joe, and he was atheist, but sort of from a Catholic background. And he would come home every so often and he'd be like, you know, what are you doing, Charlotte? And I'd be like, I'm just building this ritual gazebo in the garden to get drunk in for 8 days for Sukkot or whatever. Or like, I'm just making some cheesecake because it's our festival of sort of cheesecake, sex and rage. And
What?
Pardon?
What?
Yeah. Well, quite. And so he'd just be like, Charlotte, do you know what? I could really fuck with Judaism. He was like,
I think so.
He was like, every time I come home and you're just like making something for like Friday night dinner or like, you know, these festivals throughout the year, he was like, these are great. Why don't we learn about these in school? And I'm like,
I'm thinking about all the Jewish men that I dated and they never brought these ones up.
no, I was trying to keep it from you.
They were trying to dim your light. They didn't
were
tell you
honestly.
about the
They were
cheesecake,
like,
the sex, and
gotta
the
go down the
rage.
synagogue
Yeah.
tonight. Awful. They're off doing this.
Yeah, it's like, going to synagogue, it's so hard being like, having a lovely time, eating a bit of cheesecake, listening to
Extraordinary.
What is the festival of cheesecake, sex, and rage?
Shavuot.
Shavuot.
That one down.
So, yeah, I mean, that festival is absolutely elite, one of my favourites. Sukkot, which is sort of around harvest time, you build essentially a kind of ritual gazebo and you've got to kind of live in it for 8 days, invite people round for dinner, get drunk. There's a sort of special kind of lemon that you've got to have for it called an etrog. No one in Parliament believed me about this, and I had to bring one in and show them all and was like, smell my etrog.
What does it look like?
It's like a big knobbly lemon, but they're about 40 quid.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I know this lemon.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry.
Let me tell you about this fucking lemon.
I used to live in Stoke Newington,
Yeah.
right where it meets Stamford, and this
Yeah.
makes so much sense to me because genuinely a couple of years ago we were like, why is that so expensive?
Yeah. Why is this
Now
dude?
that
Why
makes
is this
sense to
dude
me.
on the corner selling these really expensive lemons? Now you know. It was in
Wow.
the lead up to Sukkot.
Are they larger, or is that why they're more expensive, or is it just there's the increased demand, so he can charge 40 quid for it?
Depends. I mean, it's one of those things. Like some of them are sort of pretty standard lemon size, but I mean, there's all these great pictures of, you know, some of the rabbis with like really massive ones and sort of looking on them lovingly and things that very wholesome.
This sounds great.
You're changing my views on organised religion, Charlotte, as we speak.
We haven't
As
done
we
any
speak.
politics.
This is politics.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
What is politics if not cheesecake,
No,
sex, and rage?
We
Yeah.
did earlier, didn't
We did. Shall we talk a little bit about the all-party parliamentary groups that Charlotte's a part of? Because there's
Please.
some goodies, aren't there?
Yeah.
There's some goodies. So, from memory, you can correct pubs,
Yep.
wine and spirits.
So I'm the chair of pubs.
Yeah, sure.
I'm an officer for wine and spirits.
Officer of wine and spirits.
Quite right.
Good title.
A wine and spirits officer.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Gaming.
Yep. Video games and esports, vice chair.
Then do we go deaths abroad?
Just an officer of that one.
Just an officer. And are there more to come? Have I ticked them? There's more?
Yeah, so I chair the all-party parliamentary group on nuclear. I chair the all-party group on apprentices. I chair the all-party group on multiple sclerosis. But I'm also involved in a number of other ones, including road transport and logistics, the APPG for British Jews. I really...
You want to get to 10?
I mean, if you go through the list, there's genuinely about 30.
Okay, cool.
But, you know, thankfully, they don't all meet every week. So it's...
Be tough.
What
Yeah.
about the pubs one?
Yeah. How often are you meeting?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends really. So we launched an inquiry report recently called Raising the Bar. Highly recommend everyone looks it up. And essentially about what needs to be done in terms of post-pandemic recovery for the sector. Because actually, you
It's
know,
rough for pubs.
yeah, I mean, you know, my sister runs a pub on the Isle of Man. It's, you know, probably the job that was the most useful experience before getting into politics. Because, like, you know, I've got a politics degree, but that was basically useless because, you know,
Amen, brother.
learn lots of interesting things about comparative peace processes and all this sort of stuff. But, like, when you become an MP and you're like, what is a statutory instrument? How do I vote? What is going on? But, you know, it gave me no pointers on that front. But, you know, having worked in a pub, you learn how to be able to talk to basically everyone. You learn how to be able to de-escalate a situation if it's all kicking off, because you need to know how to do that if you work in a bar. All of those sorts of skills have actually been much more helpful on a kind of day-to-day level. But, you know, 1 in 6 new jobs are created in the hospitality sector. it's a sector that a lot of people, you know, including myself, start their careers in, whatever it is that they go on to do. And of course, within any community in the UK, pretty much the only two institutions that you can guarantee it's going to have are some sort of pub and some sort of religious space. That is all that is left of the kind of public sphere in Britain, given the hollowing out over the last 30 or 40 years of all of these community spaces that we used to have. So actually now, you know, whether you drink or not, pubs are something that's going to be at the heart of your local community, because it's probably where your kid's sports team is run out of. It's probably who was organising, you know, getting clothes together for refugees or helping people out during the pandemic. It's probably the place that if you've got a sort of, I don't know, history society or book club or something like that you're going to go and meet. It goes far beyond, you know, what people think pubs is. Exactly.
I'm so glad you mentioned it in that way, because I've been thinking about this more so recently, actually, that it's essentially sort of the last remaining piece of the kind of social fabric.
Yeah,
basically.
like you look at how many bands will start out, you know, play in the back rooms in pubs on a Saturday night or whatever. If they're gone, where are those bands going to get their break, essentially? Where are they going to build an
Charlotte,
audience?
What they need to do is need to have wealthy parents, and then they can go into it properly, okay?
Yes.
The only way to go in.
Like, I love, you know, the lottery winners. So they recently, they were number one in the album charts. They're a lovely group from Lee, which is the constituency next door to mine. So they sort of, yeah, we're claiming them as well. And yeah, they literally played for years and years and years around the pub circuit in the Northwest, you know, built up this really loyal following. They're just so bloody nice, and their music is excellent as well. But now they're number one in the album charts. Like, again, explain to me how lottery winners get to do that without pubs being a thing that exists.
Right. Okay, yeah. I mean, Ed Sheeran did it, so.
I also,
that's a joke,
Yeah,
because
it's
Ollie's a
like
big fan of
people
him.
building like cringy platforms on YouTube or whatever. Like, you know, that's going to work for some people, but
Yeah.
like that shouldn't be like your only route into the music industry, or having to go on, you know,
Sure.
X Factor or something in order to be able to get some sort of record deal.
And if we're going to be boring, we could also say that there's actually quite a lot of research that I've watched on TikTok about if you're big on TikTok, it doesn't mean that you make the album charts.
No. And again, you know, you can have millions of plays on Spotify and you're not necessarily earning anything from
I
it.
make nothing. Once the record company's taken a cut of which, but how much does Spotify pay? Jesus,
what an artist.
it's like per play.
Yeah.
It's like
it's not a lot.
0.002 or something, isn't
No,
it?
it's like 0.0000125 or something,
Yeah.
I think.
So it's nominal, right?
Yeah. Whereas actually, if you're getting paid, you know, 50 quid by the Dog and Duck in Wigan to come along and play with your mates and whatever. I mean, I don't know if there is a pub called the Dog and Duck in Wigan. I just
There
looked that
should
up.
be.
But, you know, if there's not, maybe I'll get the APPG to sort that out so that there is one.
I think if you talk to musicians about it, it's sort of like virtually a tale as old as time, and either you're getting fucked by the label or you're getting fucked by Spotify. You know, it's like that's why it's one of the big reasons, you know, why touring and gigging is so important, because that's actually oftentimes where a lot of bands make their money, because the label would take the sales. Now Spotify takes the streams, you know. So
question. Do you think, okay, the more extreme version of this question is, should everyone be forced as an act of national service to be to work at a pub for a year?
Right, okay.
The less extreme version of that, are people who've worked in pubs better people?
I mean,
Did you worked in a pub?
I'm obviously biased because if I say that they are. But,
Yeah.
you know, as I said, I do think there is a set of skills that whatever you do, whether you stay within hospitality or whether you go somewhere else, I don't think there's anywhere like a pub for picking those skills up. You know, potentially certain parts of catering maybe, but...
You know, if you've ever been on a date with someone who's done this, they have not worked in hospitality. They just haven't. What do we do with this? Should we bring back capital punishment?
That should be one of the things that this gets your hand cut off by like some sort of scythe drops down from the ceiling and just
not
slices it clean
It's
off.
not
you
capital,
appear.
not capital. It's not fatal. Like, you know, we almost, you know, you could do it surgically even, you know, put them under, no pain. But if you click like that at the staff, that hand, it's gone, man.
Yeah.
It's the clicking, and it's people saying like, oi and whatever. And that
Rude.
kind of just being rude.
You said, are people who worked in pubs better people?
Yeah.
Both of you worked in pubs. I've never worked in a pub.
Really?
Well,
So we can
there we
invite
go.
the
It's
audience.
scientifically proven.
Well,
then
I was going to
that-
invite the audience to pass a mark on who they thought were the better people, but you can you can just jump to that conclusion if you want, Charlotte. By all means, I think it's pretty fair to say I'm a worse person.
Can we talk a little bit quickly about the mechanisms of an APPG? Because I think that most people... Okay, sorry.
Yes.
But
Let's do that.
most people probably don't know that that's another, route of democracy. Can you explain a tiny bit about what you do?
Yeah, so an all-party parliamentary group is a specific structure within Parliament where you have to have at least 5 MPs from at least 2 different parties in order to set one up. You have to have a secretariat, so someone who basically, helps with coordinating the emails and things like that. And then beyond that, there's a degree of sort of flexibility depending on what the topic is, what it's about, and so on. They're the kind of only real hard and fast rules. So, I mean, there is a job of work that's being done by Chris Bryan and the Standards Committee, I believe, at the moment. Might be the Privileges Committee. I was getting mixed up.
Don't we all?
But essentially there have been some cases where all-party parliamentary groups have been used to exert influence in a, anti-democratic way. There have been cases where, particularly because there's like an APPG for pretty much every country. So some countries that have got dubious human rights records and what have you, setting up an all-party parliamentary group where the secretariat is like the embassy of that country. And wouldn't you like to come to our lovely country to see how well we treat people? And while you're there, maybe you could have some champagne, maybe you could have a first-class flight.
Right.
It's kind of, there are examples of where they have been used
Are you
historically.
telling me that these people in Parliament are sometimes in it for themselves?
Sometimes, sadly. I mean, but this is the thing, the vast majority of them, there are a handful that have historically been a problem. But the actual vast majority of APPGs are focused on like some really quite niche areas of policy. So I obviously chair the pubs one, for example, but there is also one to do with beer and one to do with wine and spirits and one to do with the nighttime economy and so on, because we all actually deal with totally different things. The pubs APPG is largely looking at things like asset of community value applications to save your local pub and things like that.
That's really
Whereas,
nice.
so it's actually about like the building and the institution and so on. So some of the stuff to do with like the supply chain, for example, will be in the beer one. But then because there are different issues in the supply chain between beer and spirits, there's a separate one for spirits, because actually sometimes what they're working on is not necessarily always going to align very neatly. And you will find that the vast majority of APPGs are working in quite niche areas of policy and just really a way to convene, getting a few MPs together relatively informally to just know that you've got a few people who are going to be hammering away on a certain issue, because within Westminster there is so much going on all of the time, even at the moment where there's basically nothing going on. There's still, all of this stuff in the mix. And it's having a group of people that are passionate about a particular issue and that you can rely on to sort of say, we've got business questions on Thursday this week. Is there anyone that's planning to go in? Because we could really do with a question being raised about this policy paper that's just come out or something, and knowing that if you can't be there, that maybe one of the other people can, and so on.
So the long and the short of it is a few MPs with like serious interest in something, pubs, for example, can get together, raise questions in the Commons, and basically, it's just another route to cross-party work, right?
Yeah, it's literally just, a way of having a bit of legitimacy sometimes in talking about things, because rather than going into the chamber and talking about the value of pubs as a sector in the economy, which, all of those things are true, when I can say, as the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on pubs, and they know that there's people on their side who are part of it and who've been working on this same thing, they're much less likely to come back with, one of Dowden's zingers or whatever if I asked them about it, because actually they know that it's a cross-party effort and it's something that, you know...
You know how...
so they tend to engage with it a little bit more.
You know how in the chamber there's the mace, right?
Yeah.
This is no mere debating hall because of said mace.
Yeah.
I think the chair of the all-party parliamentary group on pubs should have like a golden pint glass or something.
I mean, that would be incredible.
It's like behind the bar in strangers.
Yeah.
No one else is allowed to use it. And when you come in, they know. They just take it down.
I do actually have a red beanie hat that says Pubs APPG chair on it.
Nice.
And I've got a silver tankard in my office.
Very good.
Because I won that last year, I think it was. I was voted Pubs Parliamentarian of the Year.
Sick.
Nice.
So it's like this engraved
Do you take it
thing.
to strangers?
Sadly not, because actually the rules are that they won't fill pint glasses or whatever that aren't from
people.
strangers.
Yeah.
So it's like a hygiene
and
thing.
safety strikes.
Because,
Yeah,
you know.
but you could that
But have I had my own pints out of it? Yes.
you could have like a Viking, like a horn, like a
Yeah.
mead horn. That'd be pretty good.
Well,
A mead
apparently,
horn.
Like I don't know, like from an oxen or something. Just hollowed out.
Yes, I have many of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
No, I don't.
You stop here. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about.
apparently the swimming APPG, they do like a race every year, and if you win that, you get a sword for your office.
Really?
Yeah, Chris Bryant's got the sword at the moment.
Of course he does. Of course he does.
So I I'm in training, I'm limbering up, I want that sword.
Yeah?
Limbering.
Ready to take the fight to him.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot on the desk about whether or not someone in Parliament would use parliamentary privilege to name said presenter, because I don't know about you, but certainly within the media sphere, there's one name that keeps coming up over and over and over again, and I just wondered whether there's sort of talk in Parliament amongst MPs about that possibly happening. Yeah, and I guess I'd also just sort of invite you to give us your thoughts generally on the situation as it stands so far.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I've heard two different names.
Really?
So from my point of view, I wouldn't be wanting to sort of bet my house, so to speak, on, who it is. And I think some of the speculation that we've seen online has obviously been really upsetting for a lot of the people that are getting accused of being, the presenter in question. I think one of the things that makes it quite difficult when it comes to parliamentary privilege is what's come out in the last sort of day or so from the alleged victim saying that actually this hasn't happened, and that they said to the Sun that, this wasn't a trying to think of a way of phrasing it, but the kind of sequence of events, the kind of sequence of events as had been presented, was not the reality of the situation.
Well, I think they basically said that they denied it to the Sun, basically, and the Sun didn't print the denial. Was basically
And that's the bit that I think we get into a much murkier space around parliamentary privilege on, because you would want to be like, sure.
Oh yeah.
If you're gonna go in and you're gonna say that someone has done something like that, you are gonna want to be very sure. And I think, given what happened in the Carl Beach situation, and where Tom Watson had used parliamentary privilege there, and the problems that situation created, I think that's made people a lot more cautious around at what point in this process it may or may not be the right time to name someone. And as I said, certainly from my own point of view, having heard two different names, I wouldn't even be comfortable that, I knew who it was to say that anyway, before you even get into feeling confident enough about the facts of the situation to kind of go in and say that. I think a lot of these situations are murky, and it's really difficult to know what's the right thing to do. But I think fundamentally at the heart of all of this is, a young person that has potentially been victimized, and kind of keeping their welfare at the center of that discussion, because it's very easy for it to become this kind of, gotcha thing online, and something that's, scandalous or titillating in some way, or that's sort of gossip. But whether it happened to you or not, I think being in the middle of that story would be unimaginably horrible, given the kind of level that it's got to in the sort of discussion at the moment.
I was thinking that, looking at, the Sun says one thing, and they're basically sort of reporting on the parents, and then the young person involved says something else, and that's kind of via their lawyer to the BBC. And you're almost now watching like a family feud basically take place via the national media.
It's very Jerry Springer. But, it was actually, I think it was Patrick Christie's, on GB News. He was encouraging someone to use parliamentary privilege. He was like, come out and use it, basically insinuating they were cowards if they didn't. I mean, it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? That you can, we really don't know the details of it at all. And to use something like that feels...
Ed said that on the last episode, right? We were saying, everyone knows like who the name going round is. And Ed was very keen to say like, well, you don't know though.
Yeah.
Like you don't, okay, fine. Everyone's saying a name, but until a court proves it or otherwise, you don't actually know that's what's happened, do you? You don't. And I think I reflected on that, and I think it's right to just, not have as much of a degree of certainty about these things, and that actually until, a court does prove it or otherwise, fuck me, it's the Sun. Like,
I mean, I don't even think that it necessarily even needs to be a court, but, it's, if you're looking at the facts at the moment, it is almost impossible to ascertain what they are. And as I said, unless you were sure, parliamentary privilege exists for a reason, and it's a very powerful thing, but people misusing it is going to end up with it potentially getting taken away. And what that would mean for people that don't have, a kind of right of reply or can't speak out, or some of, the whistleblowers that can be protected by using that space, and MPs having that, where you can say something as, one of the only people in the country that couldn't be sued for libel and defamation, provided that it was said in there. Just because I can't be sued for it doesn't mean that I don't want to be absolutely sure that that's not what I'm doing before I use it.
I don't know if I agree with you totally on the court thing, because normally I would say, well, if someone's made an accusation of bullying or, sexual misconduct, yeah, absolutely. But I think because the Sun was implying that it was indecent images with a minor, I just think that does actually need to be a police report.
And that's the really key thing for me on this, because the Met have said so far, right, we're assessing the evidence. They haven't said they've opened an investigation, and they certainly haven't, as far as we know, arrested anyone in relation to this. If you were the Met Police and you had received, again, like, just to be clear, this is like I'm hypothesizing. This is not like what's happened. But if you're the Met Police and you receive credible evidence that someone has abused a child, that person gets fucking arrested ASAP.
Yeah.
ASAP. You don't leave a potential someone who's abused a child out in the public realm, do you?
Especially if it's someone that, What are we saying?
I would like to. I was going to say I would like to have the faith in the police around these sorts of offences.
No, for sure. I do as well. But what I'm trying to say is that the Sun says one thing, the BBC say another, and the Met are looking into it. And I think you want to defer and listen to what the police are saying about this rather than necessarily what's being said about it in the media.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the way that this is played out has been sort of unedifying for a lot of parties. And I think, seeing some of the people that have obviously got a much longer standing kind of anti-BBC agenda, kind of the way that they've been wielding this as something that they're almost gleeful about is pretty sick. As I said, it's going back to, at the heart of this, there is a young person, and whether or not they were abused in the way that has been alleged, in either circumstance, being the middle of this national media storm is going to be pretty horrible. Yeah. Even if nothing happened, which is the kind of best case scenario here, and if something has happened to them and they're in the middle of this media storm, I mean, that's just horrifying to think about.
Absolutely.
Really bad place to be. That's a really sad place to leave things. Should we leave it there?
Yeah.
Should we just wrap it there? Okay, fine. Charlotte Nichols, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Some good chat, some sad chat. Thank you. Appreciate it. Ava Santina. Cheers.
Always a pleasure.
See you on the next one, guys. Cheers.